In recent decades, the United States has become known as a pretty litigious country. Perhaps it's just the way our legal system is structured. Or maybe it's due to our love of daytime courtroom television. Either way, I want to take a look at some of the more bizarre court cases of recent memory. Not to mention the fact that I've done 4 consecutive videos about people dying, so it might be time to mix it up. So join me now for a look at 5 weird lawsuits of recent American history. First, we have the time that Red Bull got sued for not actually giving you wings. Yes, as I'm sure most of you know, the Austrian energy drink Red Bull has long been using the slogan, "Red Bull gives you wings," for their advertisements. They started using it in 1992, but it was only in 2013 that an American named Benjamin Caryathers filed a class action lawsuit for his lack of wings after years of drinking Red Bull. The suit described Red Bull's marketing as deceptive and fraudulent, which is a bit like suing Coca-Cola because Santa Claus doesn't exist. With how ridiculous the whole thing sounds, you might be surprised to learn that Red Bull actually settled instead of taking the case to court. But the truth is, there was more to the lawsuit than the fact that drinking a can of Red Bull does not cause you to sprout wings out of your back and live among the clouds. The finer details of the suit argued that Red Bull was presenting their product as a premium source of energy, as opposed to something like a cup of coffee. Red Bull, of course, has more ingredients than coffee does, but some studies have indicated that the caffeine in energy drinks is the only part that actually gives you energy. So rather than launch a courtroom investigation into the effects of their drink, Red Bull decided to settle the lawsuit for a mere $13 million. Included in the settlement was the right for anyone who had purchased at least 1 can of Red Bull in the last 10 years to receive a cash reimbursement of $10. Or they could opt for $15 worth of Red Bull products instead, which I guess is for everyone who came to Red Bull for the wings, but stayed for the taste. There was also no proof of purchase required to claim compensation from Red Bull, meaning anyone in America could essentially get a free $10 if they filled out a form. And maybe that's just as good as the power of flight. One Canadian man was saddened to discover that the United States has its own legal system, and he was unable to claim his compensation. So he proceeded to file the exact same lawsuit in Canada just to collect his $10. Which is a level of pettiness that you almost have to respect, but it's just pathetic enough that you don't. And Red Bull had no choice but to begrudgingly settle this case as well, this time for 850,000 Canadian dollars. Red Bull claimed that they settled these cases to avoid the cost and distraction of litigation. They continued using the Red Bull gives you wings slogan and still use it to this day. Which makes sense because it's a lot catchier than Red Bull gives you a cash reimbursement of $10. Next up, we have the time that Subway was sued for their footlong subs sometimes being less than 12 inches. This one is similar to the Red Bull case in the sense that it all began with a disgruntled customer who decided to pick a fight with a huge company. That one disgruntled customer eventually turned into 10 angry sandwich measurers who teamed up to sue Subway in 2016. So a lawsuit was filed, and a bunch of people had to meet in a courtroom to deliberate this ridiculous case. That included examining the entire production process for Subway sandwiches, which I can only imagine made every single person on the jury never eat at Subway again. What actually helped Subway is that their production process is so standardized that the raw dough sticks that become their bread all weigh exactly the same. Maybe the plaintiffs shouldn't have gone after a company that makes sandwiches like Henry Ford made cars. The court's decision said, quote, "Unless a customer happened to measure his or her sandwich before eating it, as the named plaintiffs did, the customer was unlikely to even realize that the sandwich was shorter than advertised," which is the nice way of saying that the people measuring sandwiches need to get a life. Subway even conducted a study to find that the vast majority of their footlongs are in fact 12 inches long, and none of them are more than a quarter inch shorter. Still, Subway and the court actually agreed to a settlement of $525,000. But unlike the Red Bull case, the court decided there was no way to determine who had been wronged by the slightly short sandwiches. So the settlement amounted to $500 for each of the 10 sandwich measuring customers who were suing Subway. And if you haven't done the math, that means the plaintiffs were receiving $5,000 while their attorneys were walking away with the remaining $520,000. So we can all thank God that justice was served and these poor lawyers can get compensated for someone else's sandwiches being a little short. Thankfully, there's a hopeful ending to this story, because in 2017, a court of appeals in Chicago threw out the settlement entirely. The circuit judge said, "A class action that seeks only worthless benefits for the class and yields only fees for class counsel is no better than a racket and should be dismissed out of hand." So the next time you're making fun of America's ridiculous lawsuits, just remember, we only almost gave lawyers $500,000 because of short Subway sandwiches. Moving away from the class action lawsuits, at number 3 we have the man who sued his employer for throwing him a birthday party. At the center of the story is a Kentucky man named Kevin Burling, who was working for the company Gravity Diagnostics in 2019. 5 days before his birthday, Kevin asked his manager not to throw him a party because it would cause him to have a panic attack due to uncomfortable childhood memories. I'm guessing he was one of those kids who had to have his birthday at a Chuck E. Cheese. For whatever reason, Kevin's coworkers decided that this was the perfect opportunity to turn his birthday party into a surprise birthday party, since he would be expecting them to respect his simple request out of basic human decency. And sure enough, when they threw a party for Kevin, he had a panic attack and quickly left the building, finishing his lunch in his car. This was a real bummer for everyone at the company, so the next day they had a meeting with Kevin where he was accused of, quote, stealing his coworkers' joy and being a little girl. Unfortunately, this meeting caused Kevin to have a second panic attack, at which point his boss sent him home. And you have to wonder why they thought that the guy who had a panic attack during his surprise birthday party would feel much more comfortable being confronted with insults at a surprise HR meeting. Either way, the company fired him 4 days later, claiming it was a workplace safety concern, which is strange because it seems like the only thing he was capable of hurting was a fun time. So Kevin took Gravity Diagnostics to court for discriminatory behavior. After a 2-day trial, Kevin was awarded $150,000 in lost wages and $300,000 for emotional distress. And Gravity Diagnostics wasn't happy, with the COO telling a local news outlet, "My employees were the victims in this case, not the plaintiff." Which feels a little hard to believe, unless they had to throw out the birthday cake because Kevin wasn't there to blow out the candles. Let's just hope Kevin's lawyers didn't celebrate the verdict by throwing him a party. Next up, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the infamous McDonald's coffee case. For those of you who don't know, this case goes back to the early 90s, when a 79-year-old woman named Stella Liebeck went to a McDonald's in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and ordered a cup of coffee at the drive-thru window. Little did she know that her 49-cent cup of coffee would shape the perception of American litigation for the next several decades. When Stella put the coffee in her lap and attempted to remove the lid so she could add cream and sugar, she spilled the entire cup of coffee in her lap and burnt the skin on her legs in the process. So she took McDonald's to court in search of compensation. But it was the court of public opinion that really defined this case, as Stella soon became known as a greedy, coffee-drinking grifter with ugly glasses. They didn't say the glasses thing, I just threw that in there. But the real facts of the case are not as simple as someone complaining about a hot beverage being hot. First of all, Stella's third-degree burns were no joke. She had to spend 8 days in the hospital while undergoing skin grafting, losing 20 pounds in the process. The burns left her skin permanently disfigured, and she was partially disabled for 2 years as a result. Even so, Stella was originally only seeking $20,000 to cover her medical bills and the loss of income for her daughter, who had to take care of her. McDonald's suggested they find a comfortable middle ground between $0 and $20,000, generously offering Stella $800 instead. And that was when she decided to get a lawyer, at which point she returned to McDonald's seeking $300,000. But unsurprisingly, McDonald's refused. Just before the case went to trial, an independent mediator suggested $225,000. But McDonald's stayed strong at a clean $800. And to their credit, that kind of money could have bought Stella over 1,600 McDonald's coffees. But instead, she took them to court, where a 10-day trial took place to analyze who was at fault. In the midst of the drama-filled trial, it was revealed that McDonald's was serving their coffee at 180 to 190 degrees Fahrenheit, which is way too hot to drink. Their argument was that consumers wanted to take their coffee on long drives. But then it was discovered that McDonald's actually did a study and found that most customers drank the coffee immediately. So I don't know who they were trying to please, unless they were getting paid off by the Teamsters. To make things even more dramatic, it came out that McDonald's had received over 700 reports of people getting burned by their coffee in the 10 years before Stella's incident, and they had spent over $500,000 settling claims from coffee burns. But the McDonald's quality control manager testified that 700 coffee burns in 10 years wasn't enough to warrant cooling down their coffee. He said that the temperature wasn't a big deal because all foods over 130 degrees Fahrenheit were considered a burn hazard. To which Stella's lawyers pointed out that he had just admitted that the coffee was a burn hazard. After much deliberation, the jury decided that McDonald's was 80% at fault in the situation, while Stella was 20% to blame. I'm not sure how you could get that down to an exact percentage, but we should never underestimate the kind of people who don't know how to get out of jury duty. The original jury ruling granted Stella $160,000 in compensatory damages, plus $2.7 million in punitive damages. The $2.7 million was selected because it amounted to 2 days of coffee revenue for McDonald's. But once the jury realized that that made no sense, they lowered the punitive damages to $480,000. But McDonald's and Stella both appealed the verdict before finally settling out of court for an undisclosed amount. The day after the verdict came out, it was found that the coffee served at the Albuquerque McDonald's where this whole thing started was now 158 degrees, which would cause third-degree burns in 60 seconds as opposed to 7. So you can rest easy next time you pour McDonald's coffee all over your lap. Stella Liebeck died in 2004, at which point her daughter said that the burns and court proceedings had taken their toll on her, which I guess is why she only lived to the young age of 91. Still, I think it's safe to say that Stella was not just looking to cash in. If you want to hear about someone who was, let's move on to our final case. The severed finger in a bowl of Wendy's chili. And if you've never heard of this, I know it sounds insane. But don't worry, the actual story is somehow even crazier. It centers around a woman named Ana Ayala, who, in March of 2005, found a severed human finger in her chili at a Wendy's in San Jose, California. At least that's what she claimed when she took the fast food chain to court for putting her through this horrific experience. But before the lawsuit could gain much ground, investigators began to question if Wendy's was really responsible. Anna's home in Las Vegas was raided by the police, and a month after she made the claim, she was arrested and charged with felony attempted grand larceny. And so began a new court case to determine what exactly happened and what should be done about it. The local medical examiner's office conducted an investigation and found that the finger could not have come from anyone working at the Wendy's or the place that made ingredients for the chili. Doesn't sound like a very difficult investigation. Just look at everyone's hands. The trial also determined that the finger, quote, was not consistent with an object that had been cooked in chili at 170 degrees for 3 hours. And I sincerely pity the jury who had to look at pictures of what a finger would actually look like after being cooked in chili at 170 degrees for 3 hours. It turns out Anna has a long history of being litigious. Prior to the Wendy's thing, she had filed at least 13 different civil cases, with some of them successfully ending in cash settlements for her. Some of the cases included suing El Pollo Loco for giving her daughter salmonella, and suing a local car dealership when her wheel allegedly came off. Although it sounds to me like her wheel came off long before then. The El Pollo Loco case ended with them reviewing her claim and paying her nothing, while the car dealership case ended when Anna fired her attorney and didn't show up to court. Sounds like she knows how to craft a scam, but can't quite get it over the finish line. But I'm sure you're all wondering how the hell she acquired a severed human finger to drop into her Wendy's chili. Well, further investigation revealed that the finger came from a co-worker of Anna's husband Jamie, who worked at an asphalt factory. The co-worker had lost his finger in an industrial accident at the factory, and then gave it to Jamie to settle a debt. How much of a debt, you ask? $50. I guess that's all a human finger is worth. Although clearly the coworker didn't have the entrepreneurial spirit of Anna, otherwise he might have thought to claim that his finger was cut off by a Wendy's plastic knife. In fact, it was that coworker who placed an anonymous tip with the police about who the finger belonged to. Sounds like a man who realized all too late that he undervalued his own finger. In the end, Anna pled guilty to a felony charge of attempted grand larceny, for which she received a 9-year prison sentence. And yes, she was also banned from Wendy's. Her husband Jamie was given an even longer sentence of 12 years, 4 months. If those sentences seem a little harsh, it's important to note that both of them had additional unrelated charges that got roped into the sentencing. Anna's charges were for defrauding someone in the sale of a motorhome, while Jamie's charges were for unpaid child support and the fraudulent use of his son's social security card. Salt of the earth, these two. They were also ordered to pay over $21.7 million to Wendy's for the nationwide loss of income that the whole thing caused. Sounds like Jamie's coworker is going to have to lose an arm for them to afford this one. In an attempt to win customers back, Wendy's gave away free Frosties across the nation. I guess it was a bit too soon to start giving away free chili. But they're still serving that stuff to this day, so I guess everyone got over it. Anna Ayala was released on good behavior in 2010 after serving 4 years in prison. But in 2013, she found herself in another scandal after she filed a police report claiming that her son had been shot in the ankle by 2 men. Upon further investigation, it was revealed that Anna's son actually shot himself in the ankle accidentally, using a gun that he wasn't allowed to have because he was on parole. So for filing a false police report and being an accessory to a felony, Anna was given another 2-year jail sentence. And for everyone's sake, let's just hope her prison doesn't serve chili. And those are 5 weird lawsuits of recent American history. I hope your opinion of the United States legal system has been changed in some way, for better or for worse. And if not, I guess I'll see you in court. Now please consider subscribing, or I'll cut off my finger and use it to sue you.